Okay, we're here with David Sanders again from the Professor of Virology at Purdue University. And David, we've discussed on a previous episode that the virus, any virus, it's in its interest to not to harm its host particularly, because it uses its host and relies on its host to propagate and to replicate itself. And therefore, it's not really a very clever strategy to be attacking the host. So why are we seeing in the case of the current COVID situation that so many people are dying from this? That doesn't seem to be a very good strategy for the virus. So why is that happening?
So that's a great question. So the first thing is that a virus will evolve to cause as little harm as possible that's consistent with its transmission. Sometimes that transmission requires something that might be seen as harm, but it's going to really try to minimize that. And a lot of the harm that's caused by a virus isn't caused by the virus itself per se, but it is caused by the immune system. When we talk about an immune response, we normally think of three different types of immune response: fatigue, inflammation, and fever. Now, those are the symptoms that we have from a viral infection, the general symptoms, but all of those are caused by the immune system, and the virus has no interest in causing any of those symptoms whatsoever. What happens when we have a newly emerging virus, such as the COVID-19, the coronavirus that is currently prevalent in the human population, current pandemic. What we have is a virus that's very different from viruses that the immune response has previously encountered. So what we get is an inadequate or an inappropriate immune response. And some of the harm that comes from the viral infection is in fact harm that is promoted by the immune response. Now, I'm not saying that the immune response isn't a good thing. In many cases, the most severe effects are going to occur when people have compromised immune responses. But still, we need to be thinking about what is happening in this interaction between the virus and the immune system. And I'd like to use the following sort of analogy. If I were to invite you to my home for dinner, you would come in. I'd close the door behind you, just keep the cold out. You'd come to the table. You would see a plate and a knife and a fork. You would see the table setting. You would also see food on the table, food that you're used to, food that you regard as nutritious and enjoyable, and you would eat it. And that's because you know me, and we're members of the same society. Now, consider if there were an alien under those same conditions, and I would invite that alien to my home. The alien would come in, and then I shut the door behind the alien. Well, the alien would be wondering about that, because where the alien is from, doors don't get shut. They live out more in the open, and now it feels enclosed and trapped inside my home. It goes and takes a look at the table setting, and there's a knife there. Well, in the alien society, knives are used for attacking each other. They're not used actually for eating food. And this alien looks at the food on the table, doesn't recognize any of it. Doesn't look like anything that the alien has encountered before. So the alien thinks, maybe I'm trying to poison. I don't know. Let's just refer to it as it, okay? Just for the sake of simplicity, that I'm trying to poison it. So I've trapped it. There's a knife. So what does it do? It picks up the knife and tries to attack me because it doesn't understand what's going on. All right. Let's assume that somehow I survive that knife attack, and I can talk to the alien. I can communicate with the alien, somehow, and convince the alien that I'm not trying to harm it, that in fact, I'm going to be a very good host for it. Well, the alien will change its attitude. It will become domesticated. It will be a part of the society, and it will take the food that I provide it. It won't attack me anymore. That's what happens in viral evolution. So it starts off when we have a newly introduced virus, and they're normally introduced from other animals, and we haven't encountered this particular virus before. Those are called zoonotic infections. I mentioned before that there's another example where that happened, where we had the transmission of smallpox and measles viruses from human beings that were in the old world, right, to human beings that are in the new world. So you had this encounter that hadn't happened before, and that's where you got really a pandemic, a devastating, deadly pandemic. So, but what happens with time, and again, the time scale can vary about how long it takes for this process of adaptation to occur. But the alien will eventually be a happy guest in the host and not cause these severe consequences. Again, a lot of which was because of a virus and the immune response, and that it can occur at the population level of the host and the virus.
And so, following from the analogy, the assumption is that the virus will change and adapt to the host. I mean, by what method does that take place? Is it evolutionarily?
It's evolutionarily. It takes place because of mutation of the virus. So these are random mutations, but the idea is that a virus that provokes less of an immune response and that is able to propagate itself without causing harm to its hosts is more likely to be a successful virus. If the virus is substantially reducing the number of hosts, then it's not going to be propagated effectively. If it can be propagated without harming hosts and more efficiently between hosts, again, by not harming them, that one will have an evolutionary advantage. And so again, when it's hard to predict what the time scale is, but we all have viruses that have evolved with us and our primate ancestors over the course of millions of years, and they cause us little or no harm. This is true in any organism, that you have domesticated viruses which are propagated without provoking the immune response, because some of the pathology that occurs because of a viral infection is in fact produced by the immune response itself. So
I hear what you say. I wanted to ask you about how come it is then that the influenza virus still is fairly deadly year after year, and somehow it doesn't seem to have adapted so well.
So H1, one of the current viruses, actually two of the current viruses that are circulating as influenza A's are in fact descendants of the 1918 influenza. They're called H1N1 viruses. They take various routes to establish themselves in the human population. But there, what you had was a real devastating plague, real devastating pandemic, and it affected predominantly, but not exclusively, people in the prime of their life. And these are the people who are the most likely to be transmitting the virus to other people. It also affected the elderly. What's happened over time, in the course of a number of years, is that H1N1 was more effectively propagating without killing and having devastating effects on those people who were most likely to transmit it, that is, younger people. It continues to have a devastating effect on the elderly, people, for example, who have a diminished immune response. But that aggressive mismatch, that immunopathology that occurred in younger people, it no longer is no longer present in at the sort of levels, any comparable levels at all, as existed 1918, 1919, 1920. So the virus did adapt. That's exactly what happened. That influenza is a very good example. Now, We are reducing the problems that are caused by the immune system itself. But it doesn't mean that people who have diminished immune responses won't still be susceptible. And it's very important as a society that we work to protect those people who are vulnerable. And the best protection is to make sure that they're not exposed to the virus in the first place.
Okay. All right, that's been very interesting. Thank you very much, David. And we shall return to look at some other topics soon.
Thank you.